In the words of Alfred Hitchcock, I think everyone likes a good murder, as long as they are not the victim. Words to live by, I'm sure you'll agree. My name's Nick, and this is the first instalment of my virtual tour around the city of Brighton. Brighton, of course, isn't known for its murders. It's got a much nicer reputation. Brighton is the party capital of the South East. It's known for its long, stony beaches, its glorious pier, the even more glorious Royal Pavilion, its varied nightlife and shops. But Brighton had a much darker reputation. In the 1930s, it was the home of gangland violence, the home of razor gangs based at the racecourse, as written about by Graham Greene in his novel Brighton Rock. And for many years before that, Brighton had a much darker reputation as well. It was known as the Queen of the Slaughtering Places, a catchy title. And it was given that name because so many murders kept on happening in Brighton. People just couldn't seem to get enough of it. A weekend at the seaside and a little bit of murder thrown in. So now I'm going to take you on a virtual tour around the dark underbelly of the city and show you sights that you may not have seen before. This is the Southern Bell, and this is where we're going to start our virtual tour, because this is where I do my indoor show. As well as being a really nice pub that serves a cracking Sunday roast, by the way, the Southern Bell also has a secret. At the back of the bar is a 40-seat theatre, and that's the theatre where I do my shows. Here I am, in fact, just getting ready to do a show. This one, to be precise, my murder tour. Now, one of my problems when I started developing these indoor shows was, how do I get to show people around the city? How do I get to show them exactly where we are as we go through the show? And the answer, of course, was fairly obvious. I just had to employ a different kind of technology. So here we are, we're going to take a trip through Brighton, courtesy of a large internet service provider. Now, I'm not going to say which one, but I will just let you know it's okay. I've got an agreement in place with them. I've agreed that I will pay any copyright due on the images that I use, as long as they agree to pay their taxes. I think that's fair enough. So let's begin our journey. We're going to go up Waterloo Street. This is one of the main roads leading off down to the seafront. And as we go up the road, rather unsteadily, you'll have to excuse me, I'm a new driver. As we go up Waterloo Street, we're going to come onto one of the main thoroughfares that leads through the city. This is Western Road, and it leads from Hove all the way into the centre of Brighton. It's usually packed with cars, buses, shoppers, everyone heading towards Churchill Square and the lanes. Obviously not quite so busy at the moment. And as we go down Western Road, we're going to come to a junction, and it's still technically in Hove, but it's one of the main roads that leads from the top of Hove. We just fight our way through the traffic here, and we'll see it. This is Montpellier Road, and this is where our story begins. Actually, this is where the story ends. It begins with a man called Jeremy Botting. A man who, by his own admission, had killed over 175 people. Move over Charles Manson. But he said he had an excuse. He said that the government had told him to do it. because between 1817 and 1819, Jeremy Botting was the chief hangman at Newgate Prison in London, the most notorious prison in the country. He'd done well to get where he was. He'd worked his way up through the ranks. He was a Brighton boy, born and bred. And now he had achieved the top job in the country, dispatching some of the most notorious criminals in England. Now, Jeremy Botting, being a hangman, was, of course, very protective of his identity. He didn't want people to know who he was, so it's very difficult to find an accurate picture of him. But luckily, I've managed to find what I think is a decent representation. I think he may have looked something like... Okay, sorry, that was the wrong picture, wrong show. He didn't look like this. He looked like this. Here's Jeremy Botting in action. He's dispatching a criminal called Henry Fauntleroy. Henry Fauntleroy was also from Brighton, and he was a forger who had been embezzling money from his local bank where he worked. Now, this gives you an idea of the social climate at the time. Henry Fauntleroy was hanged for stealing money, and at the time you could be hanged for any number of a range of offences. Anything to do with property would usually get you capital punishment. Public hangings were also great entertainment, and Jeremy Botting was the man who gave the crowds what they wanted. He was the top of his game, the best at what he did. Here he is dispatching members of the Cato Street Conspiracy, a group of businessmen who decided they were going to try to assassinate members of the cabinet. They failed, and they were dispatched in public view. But Jeremy Botting was also crooked. He accepted large bribes for what he did. Sometimes these bribes were from the families of the victims. They wanted the victims' suffering to end more quickly. In order to make that happen, Jeremy Botting would go underneath the scaffold, and when the body came through, he would grab hold of the legs and pull hard, breaking their neck quickly. This became known as a hanger-on. And that's where we get the phrase in English today. A hanger-on is someone that went underneath the scaffold and pulled on the legs of the victim. But at other times, he would take payments to make the suffering of the victim even greater. And to do this, he would adjust the drop of the rope, making it shorter, meaning that the victim would strangle to death over a period of maybe half an hour, dancing the hemp fandango. So the point that I'm making here is that Jeremy Botting was a thoroughly unlikable character. But luckily for our story, karma was going to take its revenge on him. In 1819, after only 2 years of valued service, Jeremy Botting lost the use of his legs after an illness. He became paralysed and confined to a wheelchair. This is likely the wheelchair that he would have used. It's called a Merlin chair, one of the first self-propelled wheelchairs of its time. And he would use this wheelchair to earn money. He didn't receive a pension from the state, and so the only way he made money was by wheeling from bar to bar, pub to pub, selling stories of all the people that he'd hanged in exchange for a few coins or a drink. And it was while he was doing this, in October 1837, that retribution came calling. It was a dark, snowy night, and Jeremy Botting was heading back from one of the pubs at the top of Montpellier Street. As he was wheeling his way carefully down the road, his wheelchair slipped in the snow, and he fell out onto the cold pavement. Now, Brighton was a small town at the time. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody knew Jeremy Botting, and nobody liked him. So they left him there, that cold October night. They left him to die. People walked past him, they laughed, they spat at him, but no one helped him. And Jeremy Botting died there of exposure on that dark, cold October night. Now, it's sometimes said that on particularly dark and quiet evenings, you can still hear the sound of Jeremy Botting's wheelchair squeaking down the road.